Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations. Second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy McCarraher, author, speaker, and entrepreneur. And each week I talk to men and women who've lived through turning points and come out brighter on the other side. Whether this is the first time you've listened to this podcast or you're a regular listener, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit follow and subscribe. Today, I'm talking to Paul Dykes, who has reinvented himself so many times he turned it into a way of life. From employed school leaver to IT engineer, from live music entrepreneur to corporate leader, from building a business to just under £1 million to closing it and starting again. Today, he works as a self-leadership coach through Curious Minds Coaching, helping founders and executives lead their business from the inside out. He is also building a live music tech platform and serves as a trustee of an empowerment program in West Kenya. Hello, Paul. Thank you so much for joining me on the Phoenix Conversations today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to start where I always start, which is right at the beginning. So, Paul, what kind of child were you? What sort of environment did you grow up in? What was your view of the world when you were young?
I'm the youngest of four, and we had, I'd say, a very lovely childhood in as much as it was very simple. We didn't have lots of anything, and we would do like nice staycation kind of holidays, and we would make a lot of our own fun and all that sort of good stuff. So it was quite hearty and warming, I would say. Lots of nourishment. And as a child, I was quite curious. I was into lots of different things. I wasn't afraid to talk to people and ask questions. And I remember one occasion I was probably 6 and we were on a holiday somewhere in the UK, and it was a small village fair, and they had all these traction engines. And I got talking to someone who had a scale, one of these things, and I was fascinated by everything being smaller and yet working the same. And after I don't know how long of asking him questions, he said, would I like to drive it into the main ring and take it? I was like, yeah, sure. So I found curiosity has been something that's a common trait of mine. And also growing up with 3 other siblings, you know, there's been plenty of opportunities for us to have different perspectives and opinions. And I've also really enjoyed being able to grow up with them because they've given me lots of things. I remember as a young child being really into the music my sisters listened to because they had a ghetto blaster and I didn't. So I would have to listen to their music anyway. So yeah, it was a lovely basic childhood, I would say. And mum, being a former teacher, very into allowing us to express our creativity and generally make a mess and then be happy to help tidy up and all the rest of it. So lots of fond memories, and travelling all around the UK, staying in farmers' fields and going to the dairy. Yeah, lots of that lovely kind of vibe.
That sounds very rich and, as you say, nourishing.
So there's 2 girls. The eldest is 9 years older, and then she's called Rachel. Then there's Lou, who's 8 years older than me. And then my brother Bernard is nearly 4 years older. And then there's me, the youngest. It's like Bisto, you know, save the best till last.
So you were quite a lot younger than them. And do you think that affected your, I mean, what did you feel like you were going to be? What was going to happen in your life when you grew up?
Gosh, lots of things. As a child, I was going to be a train driver, a policeman, a fireman. I was going to maybe be an engineer. I was interested in all sorts of different things. And then music came along. And so I thought, well, you know, I might play music. I don't know. So I've played drums, percussion since I was I started playing the pots and pans before I could walk with wooden spoons. And then I did classical music, which I found a bit boring, to be honest, and stopped that at about 15 and then got into normal drums. So all sorts of different things have come to me. I've never really been fixed on one particular idea.
So when you got to the end of school, and I presume you were kind of left at home as the last child, at home as the youngest one, on your own finally.
Well, yes, to some extent. So my older sisters went to university, and my brother and I separately decided that wasn't for us. Interestingly, neither of us have ever felt very academic. And it's only up in the last maybe, gosh, I remember actually, I was about 22 or so, and I was working doing a job at Siemens, and somebody called Terry McEwen said to me, "Goodness me, I don't know how you've managed to do that." This guy was older than me, he was more experienced. He said, "You're really smart." And that was the first time that I thought maybe I am, just because I haven't gone to uni. Because what I did after school, I did A-levels, wanted to get away from education. It wasn't working for me. It wasn't experiential enough. Didn't feel like it would embrace my type of curiosity. So I went straight into work, into a small IT services company, and gradually worked my way up through that, because I found, like, my dad is mechanical engineering, and I feel like the work that I did in the early years was more of like a virtual engineering, because it was all IT based. You couldn't see anything, and you're still having to figure out how things work and plug them together and so forth. So yeah, it was a different journey, and I had a bit of a hang up, I think, about not being a graduate. And I realised relatively quickly it's not been a disadvantage for me in many, many ways.
So would you say that your first job then was, in a sense, your first kind of reinvention moment? Because you obviously stepped away from music, professionally speaking at least, and got into something that you hadn't been studying at school. So was it kind of like a bit of a reinvention of you? You became Paul the adult?
Yeah, so I think initially I was interested in the IT, so I wanted to explore it. And quickly I discovered that there was more to this than meets the eye. And so I think the reinvention actually started very early on, because I was employee number 6 or something in this company, and I was doing the internal IT, and I wanted to see what else there was. So I started to begin that process of reinvention. And whilst it wasn't totally moving out of the field, it went from being inside focused to outside focused, working with customers, trying to figure out how to solve problems real time and all this sort of good stuff. And so from there, because of this sense of curiosity, it's really moved me along as I went through a relatively long career in IT. I didn't stay on the IT side of it, like the technical side of it, for all that long, because I quickly discovered organizations were making decisions that didn't make sense. So I was curious why they would do that. Why would you spend millions of pounds on some infrastructure that isn't actually going to do the thing that you want, when there's one over there that's half the price? And so by getting curious about this stuff, I started to move away from being like technical hands-on to being much more strategic. And then from there, I'm like, okay, so I can see the bigger picture. That's fascinating. Then I was not sure about why other things were being done the way they were. So I went through another process of getting curious about how the business was running and operating and what was going on there. Then I started to get into the business side of leadership and working with different teams across different go-to-markets or different strategies and so forth. And then ultimately getting to a place where I was working at Verizon with quite a large portfolio, a massive revenue target, and trying to enable a side of the business that previously had not been explored. So there was another reinvention within that, having gone from very much a B2B space and gradually going up in scale, as it were, in terms of volume, to then going to a multi-channel mode. So totally changing the way in which the organization was communicating with the market and the types of businesses they're working with, the types of relationships, the commercial structures. So it was a lot of this gradual reinvention until I reached a bit more of a big bang. When I decided that this lovely corporate journey I was on just felt a bit incongruous with who I am on the inside. And so I decided to start this journey of entrepreneurship. And my sister Lou and I started working together. And as I exited the last place I was working, went full time into the business. And we ran that business together for, goodness, I think it was about 8 years, something like this.
Well,
And that,
stop there a minute and go back, because what was the business? So what was the last business, the corporate business you were in? And what was your role in that? What was your role called? You probably had a job title.
it was quite a long job title. I was the head of sales strategy, operations, and partner development for the partner side of the business for the Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific. And I mean, that doesn't fit on a business card. So it's kind of like a COO type role, basically, in looking at the overall strategy of the organization against budgets and so forth, how we're actually going to be delivering on this stuff, and pulling in the different teams across the business to make that work and come to life. And that was a serious challenge, because it was a very different motion to what the rest of the business was doing. So we were the outsiders. And then from there, I moved into Broadleaf Global, which was the business that Lou and I started as a management consulting business. And that was very different.
So how did you come up with your new business? Did it take long for you and your sister to kind of conceptualize what it was going to be, or did it just like pop into your heads and there it was?
Well, great question. And we'd spent some time chatting about what we'd been experiencing over our careers and exploring ways in which we might be able to work together. And what we discovered was that for ourselves, we noticed a lot of potential was left on the table. So I remember one of the places I worked, I wrote this white paper on, and the executives were like, great, thanks anyway. And then they got a consulting firm to come in, and they spent millions of dollars for them to produce the same thing. So I was like, that's fascinating, whilst deeply irritating. So we were having these conversations about, potential being left on the table. And eventually we decided that we wanted to explore a way without really knowing. We just felt like there was some secret sauce that was missing. So without really knowing what that was or being able to articulate it properly, we went both feet in and started Broadleaf. And it was a really incredible journey. We learned a huge amount about running a micro business, a small business, about employing people, about working with customers. I found a lot of my enterprise experience with contracting and commercials and everything else was really helpful. The journey I'd had prior was really helpful, and the same for Lou, because we could bring all of this into the business. So we showed up with like an enterprise grade approach to be able to work with the clients that we had. One of which was the British Army, which we'd never worked with anybody like that before.
So I'm interested in, firstly, what had Lou been doing up to this point, and why did the two of you think you were such a good match? And secondly, I want to know where you went to get your first clients. How did you actually start the business?
Gosh. So Lou had worked in some of the big five, and towards the end of that journey for her, she had moved into L&D instead of being doing like crisis management and business continuity. She'd taken maternity leave and then gone into L&D and was finding that much more rewarding than the hustle of being a consultant, with a book to fill and all the rest of it. And so it was from there, noticing some of the patterns I'd been seeing, the things that she had been seeing, the work that we'd jointly been doing and were curious about, is why we started to bring this thing together. And getting our first clients was not easy, because it went something along the lines of, trust us, this is absolutely brilliant. because we couldn't describe it any other way. And it took us a very long time to describe how it was that we were showing up. We didn't even know what we had stumbled across, if you see what I mean. And so we were trying to figure it out as fast as we were trying to sell it and apply it to ourselves. So it was a really incredible journey to go along this path of discovery, to try and figure out what was going on. And ultimately we managed to do some incredible things that has kick-started the next phases of our journeys, which is just remarkable, as we've been able to explore more with curiosity the concept around it's more about how you're showing up than what you're doing, because what you do will take care of itself when you start to focus more inwardly on how you're showing up. And it's taken a long time to get there.
So, having discovered that that's what you were doing with people, how did you describe your business? I mean, it must have had name of business and a tagline. What was your tagline? What was your descriptor?
If I remember rightly, it was something along the lines of facilitating outcomes, because we didn't want to come across as consultants. We've seen so many of them, and we did work well with other consultants because they would come in, they'd focus on what they were doing, and then they'd disappear again. What we were trying to do was build capacity and capability in the client's organization. So we wanted whatever it was to stick, not to be a hit and run. This wasn't about jazz hands or let's do some fun thing. We actually wanted to facilitate change, which is, so we called ourselves facilitators deliberately, and not because we were running workshops necessarily. That's part of it. Not just because we were coaching, that was part of it. We were also running large programs with teams that were directly aligned to business outcomes to transform the way that they were showing up, the way they were working. And we then coined the term the power of how. So there's the power of now, obviously, with Eckhart Tolle, legend. The power of how was more about tuning into 5 key things. Your intent behind whatever it was that you wanted to be different. Then you would discover what was already around you, what you were doing and how you were showing up. Then it would be about connecting that stuff with the outer context. So if it was within a team, it's beyond the team. Then balance was around scaling those things that were working and making sure that they had some sustainability, that they would fit for the long term. And the last one being momentum was around carrying that forward. Our role then would change in Broadleaf and we would become more of a critical friend. So we're not so heavily involved. We were at the start and we would tail off towards the end. Sometimes these programs would run for 18 months, depending on what it was the organization was trying to do. So yeah, it was really a very cool business.
And it sounds to me, it's unlike a lot of people that I talk to on the Phoenix Conversations, like you have reinvented yourself, but it hasn't come in intense, sudden moments where, something ends, something has to be changed, the world changes for you. It sounds like you have had kind of evolving reinvention all the way through, but you clearly came out of this business a very different kind of person than you went into it. Certainly that curiosity is the golden thread that runs through your life as you've identified yourself, but your evolutions are interestingly complex and slow rather than kind of sudden and breaking things. It seems like you build things rather than break them to move on to the next step.
Yes, that's right. It has been a lot of that. At one point, I was also running a music services business, a professional music services business. Totally forgot about that. And we were doing events and equipment hire from about 5 to 5,000 people. And I was doing that alongside doing some boutique consulting work at the same time. And that business I had to stop in the end because I was investing like 30 hours of my time and paying myself less than minimum wage and reinvesting everything into the equipment. Didn't make sense. It was fascinating. It fed my curiosity. It didn't make sense. So there have been a few parallel things that I've run and then gone, actually, this is not right. And then taken a different tack.
Yeah, I suppose that is another kind of reinvention, getting to the end of a cycle where something is, has been good, but it is just not viable to continue with. So you said there was a next business. Was that also with your sister? Did you just kind of go on working together and start something new? Tell me about that.
With Broadleaf, it was difficult because COVID hit us like everybody. That cost us 1.8 million, and in terms of loss of earnings, and I mean, it was an absolute nightmare. And we tried to keep people on for as long as we could. And what we found, which was curious, is that there wasn't a fast enough transformation in how the team were working to where the business needed them to be. And in the end, so Lou and I got this business up to the point of just under 1 million. And in the end, we decided quite abruptly that we needed to wind this up. This is not the way. It's not going in the right direction. And so we did a complete change of focus. And off the back of that, we didn't have a plan B. It wasn't like, no, everything's fine. We've got loads of money in the bank. No. We literally just went, we're going to turn right now. And so that might seem a bit like a silly thing to do, or, where's the plan? The point is that it started to feel incongruent. Like we weren't quite going in the right direction. We've learned a huge amount, and now is the time for something different. And so we leapt both feet into something different. And that was predominantly, we wanted to see how we could serve the people that we'd seen on our journey with Broadleaf, how we could reach people who weren't in very large organizations with very big pockets. And so we have been experimenting for quite some time in developing out. There's another business called Connect How that we do run together, that is more of like a messaging platform, if you like, for B2B conversations, because the primary route that we are exploring is both together and apart through our independent practices that we run. So mine is Curious Minds. And alongside this, at the same time, we thought, why don't we start a podcast? Which we did, called Curious Brain Farts. And that's got a very different vibe to it and is also a huge amount of fun. So there has been, I've never considered myself a creator. I remember actually going to the Daniel Priestley event, and I was in LSE in London in this lecture theatre, and I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know anyone here. This is all full of these cool kids who are really super creative. And I had this major imposter syndrome, I shouldn't be here. What am I doing? And what I noticed over the period of doing a few more of these types of things, actually, I am a creator. I've been creating lots of things, not just businesses, lots of different ideas, content, all sorts of things. So I've been embracing that a lot more in recent times, over the last sort of 3 years or so. So it's I love the creating. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it.
Creating takes many forms. Creating a business, I think, is a creative act, even if it's not arts or media related, but it's still a creative process. And you've been in music, you've done all sorts of other things. So yes, I would say you've always been a creative, but it's an interesting kind of internal reinvention to see yourself, to acknowledge that you are a creative. And I think that's a really important sort of revelation and reinvention to have had. And so how has that now brought you to where you are now? Obviously you have Curious Minds, and just say what you do in that as well as the podcast, and what else is going on. I'm sure that's not that's not it.
No, it's not all. So Curious Minds, very quickly, this is the concept of bringing self-leadership into your business. Imagine, instead of leading from the outside in, focusing on the latest tools, methodologies, processes, systems, all of that stuff is great, and needing all of that to be let me upgrade this thing and this thing and this thing. It's more about leading from the inside out. So very often the types of people I'm working with have already built something that is working for them, and they're asking themselves the question, now what? And they're not looking for another thing. They're asking a bigger question that sits underneath, often connected to, who do I need to be now? Because I've been the one who is hustling, who's making ends meet, who's getting stuff done, who's breaking down doors and all the rest of it. Now it's a sustainable thing. Who do I need to be? And this isn't necessarily a straightforward topic to explore. AI, great, amazing, will get you so far. It won't help to uncover the deeper question of what's underneath of who do I need to be now. And I love this work. I was working with a founder not too long ago, and they were struggling with all sorts of different things around who to be, around control, around overwhelm, around lots of different things. What about money? And oh my gosh, people rely on me. But in the process of us working and discovering who they want to be, they doubled their business. That was a side effect. It wasn't the goal. By bringing self-leadership into their business, it completely changed the game, which is just amazing. So there's that, and I deeply love that. It feels something vocational to me. It really does. As does music. I love music. So I just thought, why not create an app? Of course, everybody is. So I created this app called Gigbright, and Gigbright is a way of bringing, if you imagine like a Coldplay concert when the whole audience lights up as part of the show, well, imagine being able to do that without needing Coldplay's budget and just being able to use your mobile phone and the people in the audience. So I built this thing called Gigbright, which I'm super excited about. It's on pre-release at the moment. I hope to be launching that very soon. And then because that's not enough, I thought, there's a really cool project, and I'd just like to tell you briefly about it, which is sort of another invention of myself because I'm putting myself in lots of different places. It's called the Urenga Empowerment Program. And this came about because my mum was chatting to a friend of ours, she was 83 at the time, about the village that he's from in the west of Kenya called Urenga. And he happened to say that the girls in the village would have to miss 1 week a month of school for their menstrual cycle because they didn't have access to menstrual health. And mum, being mum, was like, well, that's unacceptable. And so she started a project called the Dignity Project. The girls actually named it the Dignity Project. Now, this thing started to grow arms and legs very quickly. Fast forward 18 months, and over 15,000 school days have been returned to 300 girls, which is absolutely immense, completely life-changing. Not only that, they're learning new skills. There are people who are doing tailoring courses. They're now making and selling clothes. They are making their own pads. Mum designed these reusable sanitary pads that last for 3 years. And I can see this empowerment program growing because there's already 4 projects, which is the Dignity Project, soap making. There's a brass band who are gigging as well, which is amazing. Someone donated loads of instruments. And then the 4th one is the Digital Empowerment Project, to help them to become digital citizens so they can participate in things like this and tell their incredible stories. They will have a lot of stories of reinvention, I'm sure. So, yeah, that's just a little snapshot of some of the stuff I'm up to.
It's sort of like all this kind of reinvention on reinvention on reinvention all going on in sort of concentric circles, it looks like to me. That's brilliant. So, Paul, just finally, if there's someone out there who is perhaps feeling curious like you, wanting to make changes, start a business, do something new, what is the one piece of advice you would give them?
Here's what I would say. If you're at an inflection point like that, notice all the different voices that come up, all the different stories that come up. Oh, yes, this is exciting. No, we can't do that. This will never work. Maybe it will. I don't know that I can. All these things that come up. I invite you to spend a moment with them, to invite them in. Not to overwhelm, not to overtake, just to let them come a little closer so that you can differentiate each of them, because Notice they are not you. They are only parts of you. So the moment you can say, part of me is feeling anxious about this, part of me is unsure, part of me, you suddenly create some distance. And what I would say is by inviting those parts of you to come forwards, you can get to know them. You can understand. So what is it you're afraid of? How can I help you to not feel afraid? And you can do this dialogue inside. So I would say the one piece of advice is to be curious about how you are leading yourself from the inside out. It is not rocket science. There is innate brilliance already within you. It's simply a case of reconnecting to what is already there.
Well, that is a wonderful piece of advice and a very interesting exercise to think about. Thank you so much, Paul, for this Phoenix conversation, for describing your really very unusual, I think, methods of internal reinvention and about all the reinventions you're bringing to the world. And the Arenga project is a brilliant one, and your mum has done a wonderful thing. What is your mum's name, by the way? We haven't even named her.
No, so mum is called Teresa, and we were on a trip with a group of people, and there was a younger Teresa who was there. And because Teresa's my mum, I called her Mother Teresa, and that has now kind of stuck. So people refer to her as Mother Teresa, although she's not from Calcutta and she's still alive and not a saint.
Well, she sounds pretty close to me. Thank you so much again, Paul.
Thank you very much, Lucy. It's been wonderful to be here.
Thank you, Paul Dykes, for unravelling your fascinating reinvention journey of curiosity and courage, an insight on a life that has not been so much a career plan, but a gradual unfolding. Among all the other reinventions, Paul didn't even mention that he also plays drums in Not Quite Saints, a 6-piece event band based in Berkshire, playing 90s and noughties dance floor classics for every occasion. For more inspiring reinvention stories, follow and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or maybe all three. You can connect with me on most social media platforms as long as you can spell my name. I am the only Lucy McCarraher on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.